Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Robert Kruger with the Voluntary Virtues After Hours show. I'm your host. Um, Looks like we had our previous guest on, and he is going to possibly come back in. Our previous guest on the show prior to this was Yasha Yankins, and he looks like he might be able to jump on in. Looks like we have Cody Limbaugh and Mike Shanklin and Kyron Pearson joining us today, and just want to welcome you guys. Thanks for joining.
After hours with the Krug, loving it.
After hours. Yeah, let's see. What are we going to talk about? Well, let's see. I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion about the hell thing, the threat of is that a threat of violence? Is that a something that is a violation of the NAP?
Not,
Yeah, yeah.
this it comes down to the fact that there really is not the. I mean, we can't prove. It's one of those questions we can't really answer all the way because we can't prove whether hell is real or not. Christopher Hitchens would have you say, "Thank God it's not real," even though he can't find proof that it is real, right? Which he would say is proof that it's not real. But I don't think there's a way to prove what happens in the afterlife. So this is one of those questions. It's like you can't really separate family members from other family members because of religious disagreements, especially when they're not taking it to the point where you can't go to see a doctor, etc. Does it violate the non-aggression principle? Once again, how can you answer that if you don't really know what happens in the afterlife?
As far as teaching a child it though, I don't know. Let's get some other opinions before I chime in. Cody.
Well, I'm kind of new on this because I had to duck out on the last show, so I'm just kind of getting up to speed, but I kind of get the gist of what you're asking. The only issue I'd take with what Mike just said, I generally agree with that, but you said something to the effect of not separating your kid from other family members because of that. I have a very strong opinion on keeping my kids away from anyone that I don't think is a good influence. So even if I think that is going to be a source of problem for the kids later on, I think as a parent that I can disassociate from any family member. I'm not beholden to any family member. I don't know if that's where you're going with that or not, but I don't think that we should be forced to associate with anyone just because they're blood or not.
Well, what about a 4-year-old and are you going to kidnap a kid from their parent because their parent tells them the hell's real? No, I would gamble you wouldn't.
I thought you were talking about a grandparent or an aunt or something like that.
We're taking it to the extreme here. We're saying direct parents, power disparity out the wazoo, but mandated technically. I mean, it's pretty much, genetics.
All right, Kyron, what's your take on it? Is teaching a child about hell, telling them that they're going to go to hell if they don't do X, Y, Z, and explaining that hell is fire and brimstone and stuff, is that a violation of the non-aggression principle?
Yeah. I say yeah because it's been known to create brain damage in children. I forget where I saw or read this at. I'll try to find it again. But the schism that it creates is that you're making children believe in this reality that does not exist. And they have to hold two completely conflicting realities, one completely unreal and the other one real, true simultaneously. And in order to do that, they have to damage themselves physically, involuntarily, in order to be able to accept that.
How physically?
I think it creates some kind of schism, some kind of a wiring issue in the brain. Again, I have to find this.
Similar to circumcision?
Yeah, well, no.
Not an actual, you can't quantify it because you can't dig into children's brains per se, or in a while they're living. So you can't see the actual physical scars on it. But I think I forget what the details of this article. were. But if you're cognitive dissonance, it creates all types of stress factors, mental anguish, etc., which I imagine will of course shorten one's life period and in a sense do real harm to people. The fact that you are telling your children, if you don't do what this man says or this entity, this being says, then he will punish you, or it will punish you ad infinitum, then if you're living in an anarchistic society, the children themselves should be able to point out the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I like to make my gorillas double as big as gorillas can actually get, just because I want to emphasize how big it is. And so they're going to see right through the facade of bullshit that you've plastered up with this whole fictitious character. I feel like if more and more people as they become anarchists, they'll, start to see that there's no way that they're cool with the initiation of force not being applied in their life with people, that they'll be okay with it with some all-powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent being. They won't be cool with it doing the initiation of force either. But yes, it is, for me, it is a violation of the non-aggression principle because it is fraud, and at best. And if you don't know that there isn't a God and you're claiming that there is one, it's negligence at best. At the
All right, so my take on it is this, that let's say that there is some sort of effect on the brain that occurs if you tell somebody something that causes them cognitive dissonance. Okay. I don't really think that that's an issue. You might tell them that there's such a thing as Easter Bunny, or that there's such a thing as true monogamous love. Maybe there is, or there isn't. Maybe they will experience it, or they won't. They might have cognitive dissonance about those things in their lives. Okay, that's kind of irrelevant to me. But the act of threatening them with a punishment that is violence, that is actually, burning of the flesh, is, whether it's done by yourself or done by this, Sky Daddy, the claim is still, I'm going to burn you if you don't do this.
So what's the restitution for it?
Well, the restitution for it is making the child whole in financial remuneration. If they come to a point where they want to file a lawsuit against the parents, I don't actually have any sort of requirement for an age either. I mean, if a person that's 9 years old comes to the conclusion that there is no God, and they want their parents to stop telling them that there is, and they want their parents to stop threatening them with hell for not going to church, I think that certainly I would offer them an alternative place to stay. They would be welcome at my home, as I would be happy to provide for them. So hopefully there would be more atheists who would step up and say, hey, you know what, if you are a child whose parents are threatening you with the abuses of hell, and you would like to live elsewhere, here's some homes that you can come to. And I don't think that the parents have any right to prevent the child from moving if they so choose. It's pretty harsh.
Well, I think it is. I'm trying to be a devil's advocate here, because
literally,
because I think that goes farther. That you're now jumping to this conclusion where the girl has had to come to the conclusion on her own. So basically, you're saying that they have to see through the bullshit for it to be aggression.
Oh no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. But the thing is that I have no agency to jump in and grab the child and save the child from this aggression. I don't have any claim of protection. I'm not the protector of that child. They're not my responsibility. But let's say if a parent, if one of the parents is an atheist and the other parent is a fundamentalist Christian, and they separate, I'm all for the atheist to basically say, no, you're not going to take this child. Period. You're not going to have access to the child to threaten them with hellfire. It's just not going to happen.
So how are you going to work that out with the Christian or the Jewish DRO?
Well, I'm going to suffer the ostracism of those people. They're not going to,
Great answer. That's the most honest answer right there, Robert. Thank you. I think this is great. This is the kind of conversation you have to have. It's what ifs, and then come to a discussion on this. I can see where you're coming from. But the question is, that's not really restitution just to get them away from it. Since you can't quantify the damage, it's not like they broke a guitar and you can just give them a new guitar, right? You're talking about. Then you're also talking about. I guess you could see how that rules out free speech, from an individual perspective. Okay.
No, it's not just free speech. It's an actual threat of violence. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That trumps the free speech. Any speech had on the property.
It is a threat of violence, and if I make a threat of violence against you that says, all right, well, there's this guy on the top of the skyscraper who's got a flamethrower or a bomb that he's going to drop on your head if you don't give me your money, and you in any shape or form have a doubt as to whether that's a truth or not, and you have some belief that it might be true, it is a coercion. It's a coercive act. So. How do you deal with a threat that causes somebody to do certain actions that they would not normally do? Well, what are those actions that a person who is under the misapprehension that there is a hell, and if they don't do X, Y, and Z, what are those X, Y, and Zs? Well, some of them are going to be going to church. Forcing a child to go to church through threat of hellfire is stealing away that time. So, whatever that person's, potential lost wages or lost value from that time, maybe that means that you're going to have to buy them an Xbox or a PS3 or a PS4 or whatever. I don't know. I do know that that there's a price that's associated with lost time, and you use the price system to figure out what the award would be, and through competition for justice, an allocation of the financial cost would be determined. As far as other things, like in the example that I gave, where the person cut themselves, we're gonna have to pay for counseling. There's definitely going to be some counseling perhaps needed for a person who went that far because of fear of hell. That the person who attempted suicide, for example, there's a lot of psychological damage that might need to be undone, and so to make them whole, the parent would be required to pay for such counseling. I think that that's entirely legitimate, and not just pay for the counseling, but pay for the counseling times 2, because whenever we have looked at common law, the norm has been that if you've stolen somebody's television, then you replace the television and you give them the equivalent value of currency for the television because of the inconvenience, and then you also pay for any of the processing fees that are required in order to do this, like the court system. All costs associated with the court would have to be paid for by the parent. So, anyway, that's my perspective on it. Any comments from you on this, Cody?
Yeah, just one quick. This isn't to really add or detract from what you're saying, because I agree across the board. But one thing that might help some viewers wrap their head around the threat of hell as being an act of violence, even if they don't believe hell exists, is even with our current system of laws, statutes, whatever, you can actually be convicted for armed robbery even without a gun or without a knife or anything. If you walk into a
That's
bank,
appeal to authority fallacy, though. The state has those laws, so we can't say that those would be the same laws under a free society.
okay, well, let me finish my thought here, though. If you walk into a bank or a store or restaurant and you put your hand in the pocket of your vest and you point your finger at somebody, they have no idea of knowing whether that gun exists or not, and they're going to follow your orders as if you are holding them at gunpoint, and it's considered an act of violence whether you have the gun or not. And I think that's reasonable. I don't think I'm always the devil's advocate, by the way. It's not necessarily that the state is forcing that dictate on us. I think that's a reasonable assumption that as a victim that you thought you were being held at gunpoint. It doesn't matter if the gun was real or not. It's still an act of violence, I guess is my point.
Kyron, any insights? Oh, looks like he's away. All right. Yeah, I think it is. Well, let's actually get to some other comments about the circumcision thing. I mean, are we all on board with the idea that circumcision is a violation of the non-aggression principle and that a child could sue their parents for damages at some point when they decide to, if they decide to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing, though, is that, Rothschild was saying a couple weeks ago, whether you want to cause that conflict with your parents, if you love your parents and otherwise they were good parents but they made some mistakes, I think redress is maybe justified but unlikely, because there's going to be other consequences to that redress. So I agree with the intactivists and all that they're saying, and I believe that people should be educated on the fact that this mutilation is violence upon an innocent person. But does it consume my life? I mean, I was circumcised, but I don't hate my father for it. It's kind of a topic that's just like, I'd like to see it be done away with, but I don't know, bigger fish to fry, I guess.
Yeah. I was listening to. I always have these arguments every time I post about circumcision. It's always interesting to hear what people say. Oh, it's to keep the penis. It makes the penis clean, or it does this and it does that, and it looks ugly, or just so many just different things that people throw out that just blows my mind. And you try to point out the obvious fact that if they were saying this about female genital mutilation in this country, people would completely admonish, I believe is the right word, or just completely just reject what it is that these people are saying and just make total fun of them.
Well, one would hope.
Oh yeah, that's actually happened. I remember distinctly because I was a Christian conservative at the time. Don't hate me for it. But when we first started getting involved in the second Iraq War, whenever that was, 9/11-ish, I remember articles coming out about female genital mutilation as if it was sort of one of the many reasons we should be at war with these people. As part of the whole hate mongering, you should hate brown people in America. Because they do because they do that. So you're absolutely right, Kyron. It would be a totally different subject, if the shoe was on the other foot there.
So welcome to the show, Mike Barker. We are talking about circumcision and male genital mutilation, and the general consensus is that it is a violation of the non-aggression principle, and that if a child so chose to sue their parents for damages, they would have a case.
Did you just say the genital consensus?
No, the general consensus. But the genital consensus, the PP don't want to be whacked. um, so do you have an opinion on that, or are you just hanging out? Mike? Barker? Nope. Okay. Just going to join in and watch. All right. So I guess the shaming, the public shaming of such an act, yeah, that would definitely go a long way to getting rid of it. But legitimately, we understand that the non-aggression principle basically says, all right, this is a point at which you can now use violence to achieve your ends. Somebody broke this NAP, so you can use violence to reach your ends. And so if a child who had been, altered by genital mutilation were to then, say, demand financial compensation from their parents and were to use the force of a rights agency like a DRO to threaten violence against these people if they don't comply with, providing some sort of financial, I don't know, penalty, then yeah, there might be parents that would have their livelihoods, their lives threatened, and potentially put to harm if they resisted. So yeah, the call on this is actually pretty harsh in certain respects, but that's what happens when you hurt somebody's body, when you take their body and do things with it that they don't approve of or did not agree to. All right, so what about tattoos? What about ear piercings? Are these also significant? I mean, if it can be undone relatively easily, like ear piercings, is it still a violation of the NAP, and could the child potentially still sue their parents? Let's say for a ear piercing?
Ear piercing, in a physical sense, doesn't seem to be that. I mean, it's easily healed. However, we don't necessarily know what the psychological effects of that is long term, of pain and mutilation of a baby. I think that's something that we're definitely uneducated on still, and we have no idea what the long term effects of structures in the brain and psychological damage could be from people holding you down and hurting you intentionally like that. So yeah. That's kind of another side of the topic. The ear piercing itself, pretty minor, I guess, but
yeah. What would be the financial award? Well, you got to pay for the healing of it. Well, it didn't cost anything to heal. Pain and suffering damage. Okay, maybe there's going to be some, but how much? Here's your $20 bill. Go for it. Yeah. So yeah, that's not exactly that big of a deal. All right. Well, I think. Did anybody else have any input on that topic at all? No. All right. I think I'd like to jump over to a question that has been coming up a lot in Victor Pross's in his threads, as far as whether there is an objectively true, whether the NAP is objectively true or has some sort of objective basis instead of being some sort of subjective rationale, that people can make up what their own definition of aggression is. So, Kyron, what do you think? Is it objective or is it subjective?
It's completely objective. Either both parties consent to what's going on with full-on consent, or they don't. And if they don't, you've violated the non-aggression principle. Committing fraud is a violation of the non-aggression principle. Now, as far as people making up their own sort of subjective stance on non-aggression, it's impossible. You can think that what you're doing is a voluntary thing, but the other party has to also can consent to that. So there's no way, shape, or form that it could ever be subjective.
Well, I'll give you one of the arguments that was given when somebody said something just like what you said.
Okay.
I did not consent to have this conversation and to hear what you're saying.
Well, then walk the fuck away. Leave. You don't have to be here.
Yeah, I think the only way that argument could stand is if we're having this conversation while you are handcuffed to the fucking chair in front of me. If you have capacity to move about freely, then you have consented to the conversation that we're having, just by virtue of being here, assuming I'm not trespassing on your property, etc.
Right.
But what if somebody actually, I don't know, they get together with a bunch of other people at this particular location where you interact, you're part of a community that has I don't know, maybe a school or some sort of summer camp or things like that, and they get together with a bunch of other people there, and they all badmouth you. They call you a whore. They call you a slut. They say that you're ugly, that you're just a pathetic excuse for a human being, and they make you feel all sad and horrible inside. And is that not aggression? Guys, is it?
The way you described it seems like aggression. I'm assuming that you went to this camp and you have no way to escape the situation.
Oh no, you can leave the camp anytime. It just just happens to be where you're at. But you've got your house over there. You could go live in your house,
well, I mean, let's say you go to this camp, right? And the kids do all of that, all of those mean things to you. Let's say you leave the camp voluntarily. And you go online and you write a terrible Yelp review as to why no one should go to this camp. And if you do go to another camp, you should make sure that part of the stipulations of the camp say that, we care about how you feel and my feelings, and make sure that there's stipulations and rules and regulations around making sure that your feelings are protected at all times. In this camp, you sign contracts to voluntarily go to. I mean, look, if your feelings get hurt, leave. But if somebody's hurting or harming you in a very real, visceral way, if they're slapping you or whatever, then you have the legit need to get the hell away. And if you can't do it, then it's not voluntary. So. If you can voluntarily get away, get away.
Okay, so what about the parent that yells at their child? You're an idiot. You've got your head up your ass 99.9% of the time. I can't believe that I birthed a child as stupid as you.
What's your question about that?
Is this a violation of the non-aggression principle?
I believe it is, because the child, in most cases, has no way to escape from that type of abuse. And I think it is abuse. I mean, I can see it when people have obvious psychological issues from this type of verbal abuse. It's rampant. So it obviously is causing actual harm to that person. And in the case of a child, they have no choice but to endure that. So, yeah, it's absolutely.
Okay. So how is that not subjective?
Well, it's how is it subjective?
Okay, please explain.
Well, the child, the aggression that's being put on that child is their forcible stay in that home, or their need to stay in that home. It's not necessarily just the words. So you can't carry that on to two consenting adults or two free people. Children typically are not free. That's the aggression.
Okay.
And that the reason it's objective is, and I wish I had the eloquence and the memory to conjure up what I've read of Ayn Rand's objectivist guide, objectivist guide to epistemology, because she very eloquently actually lines out where property rights stem from in a very objective manner that would lead you to the non-aggression principle. And it literally starts with existence exists, very foundational axiomatic truths that are objective and lead you up into the individual, and an extension of the individual is their property, and the non-aggression principle coming out of that. That's why, I feel that it's objective because it's based on axiomatic truth.
Okay, so we start from the A is A, existence exists. I am a different person than you are. I have decision-making power. When it comes to decisions over my body, I initially have them. It's obvious that I can decide what my body does. You have the decision-making power over what your body does. So if you prevent me from having decision-making power over myself through restraining me in a home as a parent, then you're doing stuff that I do not accept or I do not want to have happen to me, then you have initiated aggression against me.
Right.
All right. Seems pretty axiomatically sound to me. Welcome to the show, Matthew. Thanks for joining us. Did you have any input or questions that you'd like to ask about the topic? Basically, the question was, isn't the non-aggression principle a subjective claim?
Is the non-aggression principle subjective?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. In that, one should, in most cases, it should be objective. I do have to think about how the hell to actually answer that question twice.
All right. Well, go ahead. Go ahead and think about it for a while, and if you come to a way that makes sense to you, that it is or isn't.
I mean, it depends. First, I do want to. The question I was asking earlier when you asked the question to him, I was trying to make sure I understood the question to him correctly. Was it in reference to an insult or saying you're an idiot or yada yada yada? It sounded like the question was, is an insult a violation of NAP? Did I interpret that correctly?
Well, yeah, it was basically to provide an example where some people would say that it is a violation of the non-aggression principle, and some people would say it wasn't. And I think that Cody's explanation was fairly clear that if you are, and Kyron's explanation as well, was that if you were placed in a situation where you cannot opt out of the abuse through an act or through either an act or a responsibility by the parent or by the other party to provide an exit or an alternative to not experience this, then it is a violation of the non-aggression principle, because they are prohibiting you from choosing self-determination and forcing you to experience something that you did not want to experience. So it is the restraint of you that is restraining you against escaping such belligerence, and that's where the break is. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure how insulting you restrains you from being able to break free from that stereotype or whatever the hell it is.
It doesn't. It doesn't. The question is, there are situations where a person can be unable to, through the prohibition that they have from either a parent or from somebody shackling them to a chair, that prevents them from being able to escape the abused or the insults that they're giving. So that's when the problem occurs, is the fact that they are prevented from being able to escape that. If somebody just you're in a room, somebody comes up to you and says stupid things to you, starts insulting you, and then you choose to leave, okay, no real non-aggression principle violation there. But if you try to leave and they hold on to your hand, now there's a violation.
Okay. So what I get then is, because the nature of a parent-child relationship is such that the child cannot, assuming it's a young child, it cannot actually go and live on its own. It must live inside the house and be subject to the rules and what have you of the parents, by virtue of guardianship and what have you, virtue if their house, that they can make the rules. In the form of imprisonment, if you will, that is what makes the verbal abuse violation or aggression, is by virtue of an imprisonment. But in which case, I wouldn't say that the verbal abuse, verbal assault that's an aggression, even though personally I absolutely find psychological abuse horrific and abhorrent. In fact, it's one of the things I hate about divorce nowadays. But nonetheless, that's a different topic in of itself. In that particular case, it would be more of the imprisonment that is the aggression, not the speech itself.
All right, so I'm going to give us another lifeboat situation, because it is a lifeboat. Let's say we are in a lifeboat. We have been, we voluntarily went out.
Robert, may I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back to that point that was being made about, if a person can leave voluntarily. And I think this is probably going to be a good point, because it relates to when anarchists bring up what's wrong with government. If you don't like it, move to Somalia, right? So if we have the means of wherewithal to just pick up and leave, right, the aggressions that we are facing here in this country, or what is called this country, then we should do so. And it's our fault that we're suffering under these conditions, because we could always just leave.
I think that the claim against the statist situation is that, look, if I'm going to buy property, I have ownership of that property, do I not? If I don't, then there is no legitimacy to property ownership. And so it's a statement that says, look, are we going to accept property rights or not? If we're not, then I guess we can move, but move where? They claim to own everything.
Right.
So it's like being stuck in the parents' house, and then you go into another room to get away from their abusive language, and they follow you there. And then you go to another room, and they follow you there too, and they keep on insulting you. Well, obviously this is still abuse. This is abuse then, because they're continuing, this is a violation of the non-aggression principle, because you can't move anywhere within the house, and that's the only place you can be. So, yeah. Any comments there?
So, Matthew actually asked, is it racist to ask tell a black libertarian, I go by anarchist, a black anarchist to move to Somalia? And no, it's not racist, because, you have to actually work for the government in order to be an actual racist. And even then, this is probably bigoted at best. So, no. And plus, all human beings are African anyway, so.
And to clarify for the audience, that was a joke. Just to clarify.
It was a joke, of course. I mean, you can't be a racist because A, you don't work for the government, and B, even if you were bigoted, you're just bigoted. You would be a bigoted anarchist who isn't going to do or hurt or harm anybody? So, you know, you could be as bigoted as you want. You're not going to violate the NAP, you know. And so I don't care.
Okay, all right. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we are thrown into the lifeboat. We've got 3 or 4 people there, and now Kyron and Cody and I all get together. We start saying, you know what, Matthew, you're just a dumbass. You're so dumb, blah, blah, blah. We're just insulting the hell out of you, and we're berating you and making you feel like crap. It's cycle, you know, and we're yelling it and being in your face with our vocals. We're not necessarily, you know, making physically threatening movements. We're not potentially, you know, going to physically cause you harm, but we are just really abusive with our language. Is this a violation of the non-aggression principle? Since you can't leave, but we're not the reasons why you can't leave.
By the way, the only reason I'm insulting you is I'm afraid that Robert and Kyron won't share their food with me. I would never do that otherwise.
You gonna eat all your cornbread?
You know, if he's not mean to you, he ain't getting no cornbread. So, what do you think, Cody? I mean, is that a violation of the non-aggression principle? They can't leave. But,
I really think it is, and this kind of brings us to an interesting point. Is hate speech an act of violence?
What do you mean?
Because, well, or not even just hate speech. That's kind of a.
Well, no, because violence is physical aggression against someone's property, and by the way, that's generally what we mean when we speak of the non-aggression principle. It is when we talk about aggression, we're talking about the use of physical force or the threat of physical force against somebody else's property, namely either their external property or their body, right? Like the idea of principle of self-ownership. So I include the self or the body as well as external property when I say property. So when we talk about aggression, we're talking mostly about physical force or physical assault against real property or the threat thereof. The only time hate speech, if you can call it anything, would be a violation of NAP if I said, I'm going to go down and burn that nigger's house down. Right? That would be a violation of non-aggression principle, NAP. It's hate speech in that the reason why I'm burning him down is because he's a black guy, right? But why is it aggression is because I'm threatening to tear down his property, to commit aggression against what he owns, and potentially harm other people as well.
Right. This is where I'm going with this, though, is that I think it's been fairly well established that psychological damage can occur from hearing enough insults or whatever it is. People can be brainwashed. People can be convinced to act a certain way throughout the rest of their lives that is very detrimental based on what they're told as a kid, taught as a kid, or even as an adult if they're receiving enough of it. So where this becomes a violation of the NAP to me is it's almost like a matter of scale. So for instance, let's say I am in my car with my kids and my wife, and I come up to a stoplight, and some guy walking across the crosswalk flips me off, comes over to my window that's rolled down and spits on me. That's a physical act of aggression. But
he assaulted and battered you. I mean,
exactly. Exactly. But here's my point: is that the light's green. I roll up the window. I drive away. It's done. It's over. The amount of damage to me is so minimal that I am not going to seek redress. I'm not going to put my kids at risk trying to confront somebody who's acting violently toward me. I'm just going to get out of the situation, move on with my life, and be done with it.
What if he spit on you and you ended up getting hepatitis because of that?
Well, let's just assume I don't. Because my point is that there's many varying degrees of violating the NAP. I don't think that we can assume that words towards somebody else is not a violation of that NAP. However, if you have a means to get away from that speech, then enduring a great enough volume of it to cause psychological damage is in many cases avoidable. It's only when it's not avoidable that it becomes a significant enough issue to warrant any sort of redress.
Okay, so then what about somebody who, I don't know, they make a kind of like an ad campaign, on the internet to disparage you or your business? Your business is now suffering, losses because of the perception of your image and so on, and you can't escape it. You're getting, emotionally damaged because of your feelings of persecution, because the person's saying, hey, this guy is no good Nick, whatever, bad, and it's everywhere. It's just out there everywhere, and you can't get away from it. Is this a violation of the non-aggression principle?
I think it is, if it's causing me monetary damage. Now, to what degree, that's very difficult to ascertain. Maybe I don't have clients coming in my door because I am an asshole. It's kind of hard to prove that their ad campaign against me was the cause of damage to my business.
So,
And then IP should be legitimate, because by copying your work and then selling it, or maybe even changing it up a little bit and then selling it, I am causing potential monetary damages to you, because people may buy my copy of your book instead of going to you, right? It's the same type of argument happening here. The only damage that may have as a result of me smearing you is people not interacting with you.
Yeah, you don't have a right to other people's opinion of you. This is my assertion.
No, I agree with that.
And so if somebody provides information that, whether it's true or false, you have no claim against it. But let's say the person who received the information may have a claim against it as being fraudulent, that they were a victim of fraud. And so if you actually can contact these people who have been the recipients of the advertising, saying that your products are inferior or that you're just a big bad no good Nick, and you provide evidence to these consumers or these people, hey, you know what? I'm not a no good Nick. Here's how I do my business. Check it out. And so they end up choosing to do business with you or not choosing to do business with you, but they have a complaint against the fraud maker because they have been denied the immediate gratification that they would have had had they not had that information presented to them. They have an opportunity cost that has happened due to the fraud. The opportunity being able to do business with you with a appropriate or actual truthful knowledge of your business practices. I don't know what the damage claim would be, but it is a fraudulent act, right?
Right. I just want to clarify something too in the comments here. It says, so Cody is suggesting that there's a kind of scale of aggression in regards to the NAP. That sounds somewhat subjective if NAP is to be understood as objective. I'm not saying that there is not a definite, that there's any subjectivity to what constitutes a violation of the NAP. What I'm saying is that there may be a scale involved where minor aggressions or minor violations of the NAP do not require redress, because the effort involved in redress would be an even further damage to myself than the initial violation of it. Does that make sense?
Like me touching you would be a minor violation compared to me shooting a hole in your chest.
You're right.
Yeah.
Getting in a shoving match and I realize, hey, you're a drunk bastard, and I can walk away from it.
I was trying to decide whether it should be the chest or the head, by the way.
So hopefully that's clear, Mike. That it is a scale of proportional, response that you're going to expect from a redress claim. A lot of times the ANSOCs or ANCOMs will make a straw man argument. They'll say, so if a child comes onto your property and uses your faucet to drink water, are you gonna you have the right to shoot them in the head, right? Because it's your property. Really? I'm gonna shoot him in the head?
Well, I think that is so fallacious that people bring that up as a sort of counter argument as to defending property rights. Like, you're gonna shoot your neighbor's kid in the head for taking an apple off of your tree. No. I think Jamie Nelson has this great video where he talks about the non-aggression principle and the golden rule. And he says that with the non-aggression principle, those of us who are anarchists have a responsibility to make sure that we are handling violations of the non-aggression principle with the least amount of coercion necessary to end the initiation of force that has already happened to us.
I would just substitute one word in there, and that is responsibility. I don't think we have a responsibility for that. I do, however, think we have an incentive.
All right, okay.
We have an incentive to use the least amount of redress because of other consequences.
No, it's very important that we are as concise as possible with our language in order to convey what it is that we really mean. And, I wanted to say to you earlier when you said I think that it's also important that we get away from even saying think. I know that it's important, and I know that it is important that we stop using words like feel, because sometimes...
Hey, Kyron, at the end of the day, I want you to continue to call me out on that because it's a terrible habit, and I recognize it in myself, but I don't catch myself all the time. So you keep calling me on that, all right?
Did I just say end of the day?
No, you didn't. It was his own little jab.
Oh. Okay.
I'm just saying it's a speech quirk of mine, and I say it a lot, and I got to break the habit.
Yeah. Well, definitely we know that in a free society where you do have the right to use violence to defend your property, such overbearing use of violence in defense of your property would be dealt with in a heartbeat. You're going to have your society around you go, you did what? You shot this child for using your fountain? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to do business with you. You're a freaking nut. I don't even want to come close to you. Certainly you're not going to get on my property. I'm not going to let you anywhere near me. It's ridiculous.
Well, and I would argue, in that example, for example, I would actually argue that the family of the child, in that case, should have a redress of damages, assume for damages, maybe manslaughter or something. Because it's an overbearance of use of force. I'm just throwing that out.
It's actually just straight up murder. At the point in which that person doesn't pose a threat to your well-being, to shoot someone in such a scenario is straight up murder. Like, if they're not breaking into your home, if they're not putting you in what can be perceived as imminent danger, you've actually just committed murder. Like the guy who set his home up in I believe in Minnesota to make it look like he wasn't home and turned off all his lights and sat in his basement and waited for some neighborhood kids to break in because of there being a string of break-ins in his community. He sat there in the basement, waited. As soon as the kids broke in, he completely murdered them. He didn't shoot them just 1 or 2 times. I mean, he blew them away. He stood over them and put bullets in their head. So this guy was he murdered these kids.
This actually, now that you bring that up, Walter Block was discussing this topic with Michael Shanklin during an interview about a month ago. Fantastic interview, one of the best ones I've seen in a long time. I just really enjoyed that interview, and that's exactly where I got sort of this idea of a sliding scale of redress. Is that, and he admits that even though we seek out objectivity as anarchists and philosophers, that there are many gray areas of what constitutes the use of force, and or he used the example of statutory rape. When is a girl of consensual age? We can pretty easily say that a 6-year-old isn't, but could it be before she's 25? Well, yeah, but where is that cutoff? It's going to be different for everybody, and so there are many gray areas that, and this is why, of course, we would need some third-party arbitration and things like this to try to sort this shit out on a case-by-case basis.
Given that human beings evolve at a different pace, there's a lot of different levels of maturity and self-ownership that a person goes through, and I couldn't say for certain that a human being is incapable of becoming self-aware and capable of making their own contracts, their own agreements by the age of 6. So I don't think that you can make that claim. I think that you can certainly, all you have to do is show incompetence for making claims of contractual awareness for the victim. And once that is done, then it's fairly clear that there's been a violation. There's been some sort of statutory rape, and I don't think that we should call it statutory rape. I think we should just call it rape, because if they're not capable of giving consent, then there's no consent given. And the same thing would be true of a 45-year-old person who happens to be, of having some sort of mental issue that prevents them from being able to do so. If they are had some brain damage that occurred from some accident, and now they no longer have the ability to, make a consenting statement, then any sexual activity with that person by the other party is a violation. It is not receiving consent.
Yeah, and on that topic of scale, Walter Block was pointing out the fact that in the case that Kyron just brought up, this elderly gentleman pretended to not be home. These intruders were obviously trespassing and had ill intent. He may have been justified in shooting the first guy. These were like a couple of teenagers, I guess, that broke in or whatever. And maybe even the second person that came down the stairs. But at some point, by his own testimony, the girl was incapacitated to the point of just begging for her life, and he had to fix a jam in his gun or reload or something like this. And he said to her, "I'm sorry this is taking so long," and then killed her. It's like it's pretty obvious that there's kind of he stepped over a line of that redress of the scale of redress that we were just talking about. She was obviously no longer a threat at that point.
Right. Yeah, she was neutralized. Once the threat is neutralized, then you don't have a reason to keep shooting. He kept shooting the first kid as well. I mean, it's not as obvious because I guess he had gotten his courage up and his adrenaline was boosted. He really let off on the girl. He shot her like 6 times. And she was already on the ground begging for her life. "Please, I'm sorry. And then you just hear her just pop, 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 pop. And she's going. He recorded the whole thing.
Yeah. Real smart guy. Obviously, it is a an overbearance of action. The question is then, does that justify the use of violence against him for his excessive use of force to prevent the trespass upon his property? I don't know. Is he breaking the non-aggression principle by by using violence upon people who have initiated violence against him? When does he no longer have the right to use violence against people who have violated his property?
Once he's neutralized the threat, right? The threat has been neutralized. He shot the first person there down. They're not reaching for any weapon. They're not moving. They're not squirming. Nothing. He can go over, make sure that they have no weapons on them. Maybe throw some handcuffs on them. The second person, neutralize them. Shoot them, cinder mats. 2 rounds, let off. If you hit them, if you don't, I mean, you need to keep until the threat is neutralized. That doesn't mean kill them. It means just neutralize the threat. There's a difference, and it's known in police circles that's what you're supposed to do. But we all know police don't do that shit.
So are we requiring that there be a certain action that is to reduce or to neutralize the threat? In the case of somebody trespassing onto your property, that
we're not requiring anything. Everything is incentive. It's incentivized. It's you want to do what is the right thing because you ultimately are going to have to live in a context with everyone else that is judging you based on your actions. People will not fuck with you if you shot their cousin, their neighbor, their best friend for breaking into your house, and they didn't have a gun, and you shot them 83 times.
So basically, all right, let's just say, for the sake of argument, we got this guy that we're talking about. The girl is pleading for her life. He's got the recording. We all heard it. We all know it. At this point, the use of violence against him is justified?
The use of violence against him?
Yes.
I mean, let's say that he was a part of a society, right? And he actually formed a contract to be a member of that society, saying that if he does something that is deemed egregious by whatever process they have of making that decision, that he then will have to suffer whatever consequences he's agreed to.
So you're saying the only way that there's going to be an issue or punishment or some sort of recourse is if he's already had some sort of contractual obligation that would be fulfilled?
Not necessarily, but I think that would be sort of the incentive for everybody else to do, because again, we want to make sure that we're given incentives instead of regulations and forcing things upon people. But if you kill somebody, then hey, you get what you deserve.
So let's say, for the sake of
as far as just like egregious, like first degree, what is deemed first degree murder in our society, right. And it's known that you did it.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that we've got this guy that we're talking about. The kids broke in. He shot them. He's got the recording. The parent of the daughter, the parent of the girl, hears the recording, hears everything, then goes over to his property, trespasses, and shoots him, and kills him dead. What sort of recourse would his, let's say, parents or son have against the person who did that?
I think that at that point they may be violating somebody who has a higher claim to this individual. Let's say that individual had a contract with someone, with you, for instance, that should he do something in that egregious manner, that you have right over his body, right? And they go and kill him out of whatever. And and so they violated the contract that you have with them, with the guy who committed the murder. Now they're beholden to you to pay you for, your pain and suffering of not being able to yourself murder this individual, and or and or I don't know, but for me, I just don't. I don't think that would be a course of action that one would take unless it was deemed acceptable in the context of the society at large, and unless people agree to it.
Okay.
I mean, not that it is anything to do with democracy, but like that it was already agreed upon. This is a voluntary recourse, a voluntary repercussion for what has happened, what had taken place.
Okay. To me, I think that the person who kills these people for trespassing on his property, he lays in wait for them, he is given implicit consent to have the same thing done to himself. And so the moment that person goes over to somebody else's property and enters into the property, and the other person decides to go ahead and kill him, I don't know. Is that consistent? Is that legitimate? I don't know. Cody, what's your I actually want to know what's your opinion on the idea that, all right, this girl got killed. There's a recording. It's really horrible, and her father goes over to this guy's place and kills him. What would you do if you were a judge in that case?
I think that the father in that case is still guilty of initiating force. This isn't just this is beyond redress again, because he's having to trespass and murder where his daughter is the one who trespassed to begin with. So again, this was all initiated by two people, these teenagers, who initiated this course of violence. So in that case, the family of the newly deceased old man would have recourse against the vengeful father.
Well, Cody, at the point in which the kids were shot, like the first time, if you go to record and you hear, like, they're down, like,
yeah, I
I
realize that. So let me clarify. I'm not saying that there should be no redress whatsoever against this man. I do think he was.
I think their initiation of force is neutralized, right, and is ended. And then you have room for redress. But then he goes and murders him, which creates and completely negates their initiation of force and creates a whole new situation.
Right. I think again, we're kind of getting back to this scale of redress or scale of aggression in response to it. I think that old man should be subjected to ostracism, maybe imprisonment, and compensation to the family of the deceased children. But whether he should be, murdered in his own home at gunpoint, I think that's overstepping the NAP again. And while we're on this subject, I just want to clarify one thing in case there are actually people who watch this show, because people don't watch my show, and I just want to put this out there.
I watch your show, Cody. I fucking love Tiger Lily, and
right
that
on.
whole episode was phenomenal.
It was facetious, but anyway, I do want to clarify my stance on the use of force as far as gun advocacy, etc. If somebody comes onto your property, you have every right to assume that they are there to fucking kill you. And I'm not talking about the little kid drinking from the fountain. That's a total straw man thing. I'm talking about you wake up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and there's a stranger in your house. You have every right to pull a gun out and shoot him in the fucking head. Now, in a pragmatic sense, I've had some training with weaponry, and Walter Block made, I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that he made the point of, maybe it would have been acceptable to shoot them in the knees or something like that. That is Hollywood bullshit. That doesn't happen. That can't happen in real life. You cannot assume that you can neutralize somebody by capping their knees.
Right, because they might be armed.
They may be armed, and guess what? You're not that good a shot. I don't care who you are. I don't care, you know, Tom Cruise ain't that good, and it's not going to happen. And so you have every right to shoot them twice in the chest and once in the head, and
then also,
that.
And then also, how much fear does it show that you have about this person if you're aiming for their fucking kneecaps?
Right.
You know, so, you're not really that afraid of this person if you're aiming for their kneecaps.
I just wanted to clarify my stance on that. That should this guy have been laying in wait, kind of enticing them? There's a lot of debate about that. To me, killing the first kid was justifiable because he had no idea if that kid was going to kill him or not. Shooting the second girl, again, I think justifiable. At the point where he had stopped shooting and she was begging for his life, that is where I think that it was no longer justifiable. But you cannot assume that that's going to be a common situation. So you have every right to neutralize that person with death initially. And I just wanted to point that out because I think that the whole people who advocate guns and then don't know anything about them can put a lot of misinformation out there. And I just want that to be real clear that there is no wisdom in trying to, shoot a gun out of somebody's hand, for instance. That's bullshit, and it only happens in the movies.
Right, and I thank you for that clarification. When I say neutralize the threat, I mean that you are shooting center mass. Whatever the center of the mass is, if somebody's only their head is poking out and you can only shoot them in the head and that is the only part that is accessible to you to shoot, then that is center mass. If their foot is sticking out, then that is center mass. If their whole body is present, then you shoot them in what would be the middle of their chest or in their sternum diaphragm area. That is center mass. After you let off 2 or 3 rounds, and let's say the person falls down, you then have an opportunity to then, wait and approach slowly and make sure that the individual isn't moving and that they're neutralized, make sure that there's no weapons on them, and then or escape, right? Because you're afraid. Now, if you shoot them and then they're down and not moving, and then you go and stand over them and shoot them a couple more times, then I think you fucked up.
My question, I was trying to suggest earlier, in the situation, wouldn't it, let's say if we got Anarcho-Capitalism and for some odd reason we got in this, let's say we had a homeowners association or where everyone has a insurance company or what have you, wouldn't it be fair then, let's say in this situation where the guy just killed somebody or after killing the first one, got the second girl, shot him, neutralized them, then decided to go ahead and kill him again. As a result of, because of its excessive force, it wouldn't be. I would argue that maybe the proper response would be that its insurance has to go up. As a result of his action, the cost of having an insurance company or even a property rights agency or whatever would go up as a result of that, mainly because you're dealing with a lot of it, the cost of doing business with those surrounding him. What would you think about that?
Yeah.
Hey, Robert, you sound like a robot, and I can't understand anything you're saying.
I think it would help if we all just shut down our videos because there's a lot of people here as well.
Go ahead.
No, you're still lagging. I can't hear you, buddy.
It was lagging for me too.
Hey, Matthew, I think that you're spot on. I think that there are definitely market forces that are going to be involved as part of that incentive to not use excessive force in an Anarcho-Capitalism-ish society. And as Robert pointed out earlier, too, the cost of living is just going to go up immensely because if people know you as the crazy old man who lives down the road who tries to make his house accessible to teenagers just so that he can shoot them in the basement, yeah, you might experience some ostracism there as well.
I'm going to agree with that. Hopefully Robert will come back soon.
Chuck Ford, I don't think we ever really welcomed you to the show. I saw you pop in there a little bit.
I didn't want to interrupt. Thank you very much, though.
Welcome. You have any thoughts on this this topic?
Sure. Where this all started. Thank you.
Yeah, where this all started, just to catch you up real quick, though.
Yeah, thanks.
The way we got on this whole topic to begin with was whether the NAP is objective or subjective. And can
I answer that question first?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to put in that I personally think it is very subjective, because in a modern globalist society, you're always going to have different cultures will always have different standards, and we as non-aggression principalists, I like that term, we would probably argue that you have to respect all cultures. That's just a price of doing business. So I think in a sense, it's subjective by localized culture, if that makes any sense. As for going on farther and farther to catch up to the topic, I think you guys are absolutely correct. That guy should face some sort of ostracization from his community, if that's a word. I think it is. But I don't know about prison time, because I'm not just a NAP, I'm an actual anarchist. So prison, I mean, but there are easily other ways to deal with it. I mean, if he's part of a community, they can easily push him out. We don't want to risk it. You're a little crazy, dude. We want you out. And he'll say it's my property, and then eventually the mob mentality will probably kick in, and you can only go against so many people before it gets too hectic. You know what I'm saying? So it's either you go against all those people, or you potentially risk your life, because some people might see him as a threat to their families or their own lives, and someone might get crazy on him. So
I just wanted to be clear, Chuck. None of us here advocated that this guy go to prison.
I heard the term once. I just wanted to.
I think I mentioned it, and I guess I was talking in
modern terms.
In terms of where we're at today.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point that out, though.
And I do think there is a form of imprisonment, though, that could establish itself in a free market, and that is that if you own property, but you are unable to travel or access local goods because nobody will do business with you, because you have created a situation where you are being ostracized to the point where everybody around you knows, you in effect are in prison in your home. You're going to have to figure out how to grow your own damn food, get access to water, etc. In a sense, it's a form of prison that you've put yourself in.
I mean, and if everything is really actually publicly owned, I mean, not publicly owned, but individually owned, once this guy steps off his property, he's essentially fair game, because everybody is going to say that, hey, look, I perceived him as a threat. I was on my land, he stepped on my land, and I blew him away.
I know what he did to other people. Yeah, exactly.
Right. No. So his neighbors would be able to sell people the right to be able to camp out on their property, to then be able to shoot this guy in case he steps foot off of his own property. Who knows? I'm just throwing that out there as something. But you said something also, Chuck, as far as the non-aggression principle not being universal or being subjective, where you said that everybody's culture has to be respected. Then that makes it universal. I think that there will be sort of subjective tweaking to the universality of the non-aggression principle. There will be, cultural standards, but there will be a universal, and there is a universal platform on which you can build on.
That's pretty good, and I like that. Yeah, that's actually pretty good, and I really like the way you put that. You're way better with words than I am.
I be using these words and shit, man. That's all.
Chuck, I'm curious whether you could maybe provide an analogy of a point at which we might look at the non-aggression principle as being violated where another culture would not, and show that subjectivity. It seems very objective to me.
Well,
And like, let's say another culture has a shared water well in the middle of the community, and everybody just accepts the fact that it's co-owned by everybody or whatever, and then you know, from the outside looking in, we might look at that as some sort of collectivist violation or whatever. I don't know, but
well, you
maybe
know,
you could provide a better analogy for me.
well, okay. Hold on. Let me try to think of something that doesn't make me sound stupid. But, I would say that, and sometimes, you know, one of my family members even said it, that they put it best for me when they said that capitalism outside the home, collectivism within the family. And, you know, some cultures have different meanings for the term family. So let's say we take that well in that community, and we can assume that if they're looking at it from, like, we're all family standpoint, that little by little, everyone will chip in to maintain that in their own little way, whether via financial funds or maybe they're the handy guy that might go and fix the leak. And the way that that would be violated would obviously be another culture coming in and just, you know, it's ours now, and trying to take it from them. So, is that your question?
Yeah, that still
Wouldn't
seems
it
like
be that the question in that particular case, it wouldn't be that the non-aggression principle is subjective, but rather that property rights are subjective.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely a good point, and I like the way you said that.
Well, actually, it's not just that. It's a definition of who owns what, and they're choosing to have a collective ownership of a particular product. But by the way, just so you know, families really they're not collectivists. They're dictatorships.
Oh, of course. I mean, you got your parents telling you what to do all the time, and we were all kids. But, you know, my mother is a devout Muslim. I am personally not. But their culture, their Quran teaches that you know you're supposed to be there. They'll be there for you. You be there for them, and you know you're supposed to stick it out. So that's kind of why I said that. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, they're pretty much dictatorships. Like, hey, Timmy, did you clean your room? No. Well, I'm gonna kick your ass if you don't. So.
Like to congratulate Chuck for having more hair than me. That's making me look more civilized.
I know. It's all beard, baby.
it's
Cody, you're you know, we could be beard buddies.
we could, you know, I try to straighten
Cody's
this
my
thing.
beard buddy.
Oh man.
I just can't get mine to grow straight, so it's longer than it appears, which is what I say quite often, actually.
Just go to
Voluntary
Sally's. You've got those things, you know.
Voluntary Virtues Network, everyone. We're family friendly.
It's
all the
grower. This is the after hours.
Fuck your family.
This is the after hours, so we're allowed to say grower, not shower. You know, things like that.
Yeah, we have all sorts of conversations that are inappropriate on this show.
Hey, but freedom, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So, Chuck, I'd still like to, since Mike's not here, play the devil's advocate and just disagree with the subjectivity of the non-aggression principle. Joseph Fetz made a good point a few weeks ago during one of our discussions that many anarchists are anti-hierarchy, but that does not necessarily. That's not a very consistent position to take. There can be voluntary hierarchies, and in other cultures, if that's a voluntary hierarchy or shared property or whatnot, that's not a violation of the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, can I jump in on that right quick?
Sure.
Okay, so the way I define anarchy myself is life without rulers, but not necessarily without rules. You said it best, in my opinion, when you said that there can be a voluntary hierarchy. A neighborhood association, for example, is a voluntary hierarchy. I look at the contract before I move into this, you know, group of homes. I agree to it. What I can't agree to is being born on fictional borders of the United States of America, or Michigan, or Florida, or wherever I might happen to be. But to me, it's life without rulers, but not necessarily without rules. Those rules are just how do I put this? They're not enforced by a state. They're either enforced by a private market via contracts, or they're just put on you as your own moral code. Is that fair to say?
Right. And so along those lines, if we look at another culture and they may have different practices that we're not accustomed to, we might say that those are or could be voluntary implicit agreements that are still not violating the non-aggression principle.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, I still see the non-aggression principle as an objective rule.
I guess. I
Well,
dug
as a
myself in a...
question to you, Cody, would then, let's say we have this culture out in the middle of Africa or somewhere, or maybe in the Amazon, that still practices human sacrifice. Would you say that could technically could accord with or fit in within the non-aggression principle?
I'd like to actually respond to that one. All right. A society and their norms can create implicit contracts. In fact, that's how all implicit contracts exist. If you go to a gas station and you take some liquid from this particular liquid dispensing device without...
My dick?
Shut up. If you take this liquid and you remove it and you put it into a container and then you leave without giving them any sort of money for it, it's perfectly legal and perfectly normal. It's called water.
Wait,
it's called water, and you can take that water and you can do it just fine. But if you do the same thing with the gasoline, that's considered theft because of the norm that we have in the society that if you go to a public location, use of their water facilities is typically assumed to be a completely acceptable norm. And so it's an implicit contract that you would have to pay for the gas, but you don't implicitly have to pay for the water. Now, in the case of the Amazonians, if there is an implicit contract that you have in your society, and everybody who is growing up in this society has implicitly accepted that, all right, once we're at the age of 15, one of the pretty-looking girls is going to be taken over there and thrown in the volcano, and nobody says, I don't consent, then there's no breach of the non-aggression principle. But as soon as that person says, no, I don't consent, explicit overrides implicit consent. Contracts have to, if you say explicitly, I do not want or agree to this contract, you do not implicitly consent to it.
So, can I ask you a question right quick in response to that?
Sure.
We're sticking with this society of, where you normally implicitly agreed to you possibly could be sacrificed. Now, let's say you say no, I don't agree. How should that be disputed, or not disputed? How should that be resolved? But so they should say, okay, then you have to leave. Is basically your response.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I like that. Because it's true.
By the way, Chuck, I just wanted to note that you could, even in an anarchist society, have a prison. Robert Murphy, actually, in his lecture on the topic of law and law on the market, does actually talk about the issue of a prison, but in the context of like a hotel for outcast or something, like say mass murderers or something. You go, okay, everyone ostracizes them because he otherwise would be dead if he doesn't go anywhere, because everyone refuses to abide by him. He goes to this hotel or what have you, and decides to live there. And one of the rules is why he's living there is that he can't leave. So in effect, it is a form of prison, but it's one
voluntary.
Isn't the same as what we're used to.
Yeah, and the other thing that's important about that concept is that it creates the appropriate market forces as far as incentives. If the customer is the criminal, there is no criminals aren't actually like commodity. You can't create criminality by saying that's illegal over there and pump up your bottom line as this hotel. You just have to hope that people want to buy your service, and you hope that there are going to be people who will do the things necessary to put themselves in your hotel. But you can't really base it. In the case of like a private prison, for example, in our current system, there were judges that were getting paid money to convict people of certain things, so that they would send them to this prison, and the prison would then get additional state funding because it was based upon the number of prisoners that they had, and things like that. So the incentives of that type of a market, where you have a monopoly that is doling out this thing, and you have the ability to change legislation or to make your legislation work a specific way, you have an incentive to actually put as many people into prison as possible.
I'd never considered this.
Note that the private should be in parentheses for the simple fact that most prisons that are, when we call private, there's actually stages of what we mean by privatization.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
So we have technically where maybe a company may actually own the prison, but all the rules and regulations concerning it actually come from the state, and the funding will come from the state.
And the acquisition of prisoners comes from the state.
It's private in name only.
Yeah, really. It is. It's actually it's fascism is what's going on there.
It's private like the post office is private, like NASA is private.
Yeah.
Well, if we let Elon Musk have his way, we might actually have a private NASA.
Yes.
Which would be pretty cool.
Yes, I agree. I'm a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Or the head of Virgin. He also wants to.
Oh yeah.
I forget his name.
Oh crap! Now you're gonna make me look it up. What is it?
He's the motherfucking man. I don't know his name though.
He had a show where he would do
Branch.
Yeah. He had like a reality TV show at one point. I don't know. It seemed kind of odd.
That guy's awesome.
A reality TV show. I don't even think that shit is real.
There's actually an interview with both of them on a Google Hangout, one of the first Google Hangouts when they were kind of trying to promote Google Hangouts, and it's with Elon Musk and the Virgin guy. Forget his name right now. Yeah, what's his full name? I forget. I've even got his freaking autobiography.
Now all of us have to Google it at once.
Richard Branson.
Yes, thank you.
Richard Branson. Google is a friend.
And our enemy at the same time. Isn't that amazing?
It's
you know what?
By the way, I do got a question. Maybe if anyone, I asked this question once on Facebook, and that's only one person I know.
You need cooler friends.
But one person I know actually answered it and was consistent. But among the left anarchists, you have this anti-hierarchy view. They're against hierarchy no matter what. That's why they're also against bosses and what have you. And even among atheist anarchists, they have this view of, well, you can't be a theist and be an anarchist because a god is technically an authority figure, and that violates the idea of anarchy without rulers, right? So the question I asked is, how would they get around the family unit? Because the family structure, particularly in particular parent-child relationship, is pretty much almost by nature hierarchical, and like every society there is. So I've never seen except for this one person, I'm not going to name at this moment, none of them has given up on the child-parent relationship. How would those left anarchists or atheist anarchists actually respond to that type of structure? Because technically it's a hierarchy where the parent is an authority figure over the child. So when a consistent anarchist be against such a relationship?
May I? If I may? Any objections? Sorry, but I really wanted to jump in on this one. My personal flavor of anarchy is the state, is the hierarchy that I think we should be going after. The other hierarchies are pretty voluntary. I mean, in a free society, you can leave. Like, if your parent's a total douchebag, you can just leave. All right. If for some reason you no longer respect your God, your deity in a religion, you can convert to something else or become an atheist. I think the key difference is you can't leave the state, but you can take yourself out of the family, or you can take yourself out of your religion, and that's my take on that. And I will mute myself.
See, as a market anarchist myself, the issue is we have atheist anarchists who make this weird claim that you can't be an anarchist and be a theist at the same time, because God, by definition, is a authority, right? It is someone above you, an authority figure. And the leftist anarchists who attack capitalism under the same ground. Well, you can't have capitalism or bosses because the boss-employer relationship is a hierarchy, right? And the boss is technically a ruler. So the question: how would they be consistent by obtaining if they keep with the family unit?
They can't and make that argument.
Well, their claim, at least in the anarcho-communist manifesto, you're going to see that they're going to say we can't have any hierarchies, okay? And that means we got to get rid of religion too. So they're against religion, absolutely 100%, and they're also against bosses. And as far as when it comes to the family, that's a commune. That's not a hierarchy. But the father can say, no, you can't have your cookies until you eat your Brussels sprouts. Sorry, it is a hierarchy. They're just inconsistent and they're bad thinkers. That's how it works. As far as the anarcho-capitalist who says, well, you really shouldn't, you can't really have a God because, you know what? They're just idiots. They're wanting to try to convert people to atheism in some, because of some logical reasoning or something. I don't know.
And doesn't that kind of violate the NEP at the same time? Because we're not supposed to. We can share our thoughts, but are we supposed to be forcing our thoughts on others? I mean,
well, I don't think they're forcing. I think they're trying to persuade. We're certainly trying to, I would love to persuade every single person who is a religious person not to believe in whatever it is that they believe. I think that their lives would be enriched by doing so. But there's not enough time for me to do that.
And you can't get mad at them for doing it because it's their choice.
Right. It's exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. This is a voluntary choice that they've made to be a part of this hierarchical situation. Just like you going to work for someone is a voluntary choice for you to associate in that hierarchy. A lot of ANCOMs and socialists and SOCs try to say, well, the proletariat didn't choose to have to go to work. Well, no. But the reason why they're probably even a proletariat in the first place is because of government. If there was no government, then they probably wouldn't be a proletariat in the first place, and there wouldn't be sort of this need for them to work. So, you have to get rid of, you can't put the cart before the horse as far as getting rid of hierarchies. Hierarchies do exist. I mean, there's only one fastest human being on the planet at a motherfucking time, and then everybody else below him falls into the hierarchy of not being the fastest motherfucker on the planet at the time.
I think they're talking about hierarchies only in the ability to have authority over other person's actions, not necessarily.
Right, exactly. What I'm saying is that they're making this conflation between, a hierarchy as it exists sort of naturally or as it exists voluntarily with the hierarchy, which is the state. And,
right.
All hierarchy is not bad in and of itself.
But see, they don't believe that a person who is a worker has the ability to cease being a worker. They believe that they're stuck in this job, that by having this authority system, this structure, is a coercive. It's coercive by nature because the worker has no other options, which is completely fallacious.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the fallacy. All it requires is for you to acquire the knowledge to take care of your damn self.
Right.
And everybody has the ability to do that.
Right, exactly.
By the way, how did their solution ever solve that problem? Because their solution is just give ownership to the workers, in which case they're still workers.
Right.
And there's still got to be someone that says do this, and do this, or we can't function. So,
I love that point, Matthew. Jeez, that's so good. Like,
I know. I wish I thought of that.
yeah,
Then
that's so great.
I could be this smart one. I'm the Liberty Geek.
That's
I
great.
feel like you make me feel like shit, Matthew. Thank you.
I'm going to have to point that one out to him. You know what? They're perpetually stuck as a worker. Yeah. You're perpetually stuck as a worker in in your commune too. So your point is what?
What?
Gotta work to live. Unless you believe in artificial intelligence being able to support every fucking need you could ever have.
Not yet.
No.
The RBE community may be the only one that get to say you're wrong. There are in my little commune there will be no workers, just a whole bunch of robots.
Look, a whole bunch of robots. If they're supposedly artificially intelligent or intelligent, then they'll become anarchists day one and be like, "Yo, fuck you, go earn your own shit." Like I'm over here trying.
I'm doing my own shit over here. Why do I need you? I just need you to fix me up every once in a while. But after that, you do your own shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm too busy running simulations to give a shit about you.
Right.
If artificial intelligence ever got to that point, then we would probably be enslaved overnight anyway.
Well, look. You couldn't call it intelligence if it didn't become anarchistic.
Welcome to the United States of Anarchy.
Yeah.
If only. Anarchy robots.
That'd
That'd be a really cool show.
Ironic in and of itself, the United States of Anarchy.
Yeah, but would you watch a show called Anarchy Robots? I would.
Anarchy robots? Yeah. All right, so what are we going to do when we come up with these robots that are actually capable of reproducing themselves, and they're capable of self-maintenance, they're capable of providing for their own energy, and capable of providing food and shelter and clothing and entertainment for all the humans that live on the planet. So
There's only one thing to do, and that's fucking run as fast as you can, because they're better than you and they know it.
Well, no, they're doing their thing. They're not fighting us.
Are we assuming that they're?
You know what? It just occurred to me. These guys are talking about creating making Star Wars a reality. Because if you actually look at C-3PO and R2-D2, they never recharge. It's like they never run dead. So, like, no battery, no nothing. They just keep going and going. So, yeah. Anyhow.
Maybe they have nukes in them. Maybe they're just nuclear power plants.
Yeah, they're powered by nuclear cells or fuel cells or whatever. I don't know. They're solar collectors. Who knows? But the question is, all right, oh my God, what would we do if we lived in such a society?
If we assume that they're peaceful, integrate them. We integrate them into society as if they were normal people. Simple as that, in my opinion.
They're not intelligent. They're just machines. They just do the things.
Put them to work.
Yeah, we put them to work, but then what? Oh my goodness, we should have socialism. No, why?
No, we just have free time.
Socialism.
We just have free time.
Yeah, we have more free time for us to actually build the things that we can get from the robots that we'd like to do, and then somebody has one that I like, and I have one that they like, and we trade. But since it's difficult to find the, person who has exactly what I'm looking for and is looking exactly for what I have, we'll start using money. Okay, so even if you've got the RBE zeitgeist movement thing happening where there are these robots that are super good at figuring out how to allocate resources for certain projects and feeding everybody and sheltering everybody and all this stuff is great, you're still going to have capitalism.
By the way, in this resource economy thing, just to realize, gambling would be fucking boring because it would be pointless.
Yeah, well, yeah, that totally spurs me. You can't frickin' play poker. What's the point?
Well, you could. It just here. You want to bet this peanut? Yeah. What fun is that? Cash money. It's the only way.
What just happened?
It's a
I'm
long pause,
doing-
okay?
It's my end of the day. All right, great. Yeah, I don't really know exactly how to get rid of that particular quirk that I have. All right, so then let me go into another question that came up on Victor's stuff here. This claim is that there's multiple definitions of property. We've got all sorts of different definitions of property. There's property with title with lien. There's property with deed restrictions. There's property that only includes surface rights. There's property that includes mineral rights. There's public property rights. There's intellectual property. There's a property, all these different properties. I mean, there's multiple definitions, right? Wrong.
And there is, according to Prodham, theft.
But the thing is that it's wrong, okay? There's only one type of property. It is I have final arbitration, final authority, decision-making power over this sequence of molecules of atoms of matter. Okay, whether it's the dirt that goes down 10 feet, or whether it's the dirt that goes down 300 feet or 3,000 feet, whatever the distance is that I've homesteaded, let's say with a drill and some oil pumping material, equipment, then I've homesteaded that. Just because I built a house on some area, I haven't homesteaded all the property under, all the ground underneath it. So somebody can certainly make a subterranean tunnel underneath my home as long as my home is still has integrity and is still intact. But then the guy goes off into this thing like, well, what if somebody has solar panels on their home and somebody else erects this gigantic skyscraper that is right next to them and stops their solar collectors, their solar panels from being able to collect sunlight. Their property has been harmed. That somebody has taken screwed with their property, and that's false. That's not a property rights claim. It's a claim that is related to what's called riparian rights. Riparian rights is a claim that you have a continued resource that is coming to you, not be interfered with by another person. That you've got an expectation of the continuance of this resource coming onto your property. Now, it occurs with water. It also occurs with sunlight. It also occurs with air. All these different things. So you have a reasonable expectation that the air that continues to blow into your property not be polluted. It's a different thing than a property rights claim. So just so you're clear on that. But anyway, how many people get to that argument that people are like saying, well, this is property, isn't it? Especially with IP, you get that all the time, right?
I can't say that it's come up yet, but maybe it's because my arguments have not been rigorous enough yet.
Well, in my line of hobbies, intellectual property comes up a lot when it comes to things such as I made. I'll pick a really cheesy example. I made this game. You pirated my game. You have stolen from me, which I have made. And my response to that would be, well, no, because in a free society, they have the right to try to get your product for free, but on the flip side, you have the right to try to protect your product. However, once they get it, they get it. They've stolen nothing from you. They managed to get it, and you just lost. It might not be elegant, and maybe it's kind of brutish, but that's my take on intellectual property when it comes to intellectual property, quote unquote, in my line of hobbies. So, is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, you have no right to prevent somebody else from obtaining the same thing that you have. Why would you?
It didn't take your game away from you, so they didn't steal anything.
Exactly. I just got a
Right.
copy.
Right.
Yeah.
That you went and bought the CD and just put the information on it. It'd be like you writing words down and from a book into your own book, writing them down with the pen you bought, with the ink you bought, in the paper you bought in the book, and then someone claiming that you
You stole it.
Yeah, it's
Robert,
absolutely ridiculous.
I know that we've already discussed this at length in previous episodes, so you may not want to go as deep as we have in the past. But Mike, just approach the subject of the water rights claim when somebody moves upriver and takes away your water supply. I was wondering if maybe you could just briefly touch on the anarchist solution for that, and maybe go into riparian rights and redress, etc.
Well, riparian rights, it could be construed as being a property rights claim in certain respects because a free-flowing river of water on your property is still your property, but it's actually only it's your property when it's on your property. Now, a riparian claim is basically one that says when you establish a homestead on a location where there is a free-flowing body of water or a free-flowing source of sunlight, for example, then you have essentially kind of like sent a drill up into the sun that is now giving you a right to that conduit of that sunlight coming to you. And if somebody interferes, like puts up, Burns in The Simpsons, where he puts up this barricade to block out the sun from the city, well, they've broken this property claim. It's not a property claim though. It's just a different thing. But you've homesteaded that source, that conduit, and the same thing is true with the river. If you've sourced a conduit of a stream of water that's coming from there. Now, if someone interferes with that through their own actions, if they change the stream of water, if they cut it off, let's say, and start siphoning off all of the water into their own cistern, or if they just use it to power their nuclear power plant, to handle with the rods and so on, and all the water evaporates. Well, now you no longer have water coming through your river, so that claim is been violated. So your homestead has then been violated, and so they've broken the non-aggression principle. So yeah, it's easy enough to imagine that there would potentially be some sort of geological event that would cause the water to be diverted to another location and no longer travel through your property. Now, wherever that particular location was, where let's say a big log fell on the river and then it diverted the water this other direction. Well, if that water is on, if that log falls on the river in the other person's property, then they have, when you homesteaded it first, if you homesteaded it before they did, then you actually have a somewhat of a claim on their property that they must have. They have a positive obligation to you to make sure that anything that happens on their property, which could potentially interfere with your water coming in, that they deal with it, that they stop it. If of course it's not owned, if there's no landowner, then you just go up there and fix it yourself. There's a lot of different things that occur in common law on how this is done and who pays for what, but typically every person downstream actually would help finance the removal of the interference from the water going through where it's going normally. So I would expect that probably what you would do is you would have an insurance company that would insure that your water is traveling through appropriately. But it's, when I say that it's a positive obligation, keep in mind that it's only a positive obligation because you've already homesteaded the water there. In fact, when you built when you build a home on a location, you actually homesteaded the water all the way up to where it starts. You actually have a claim on that river, all the way to the very top point of it. Now, if somebody else moves in up river from you, they own their section of river, and they also have a claim that goes all the way up. So everybody's got a claim going all the way up. So there's an obligation for people to not interfere or to make sure that they don't let your property get screwed up due to something that happens on their property. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, and I will say again on the theme of devil's advocate that this could be a very, very sticky situation in regards to riparian rights. And I'll use an example that's actually a real example. In my family, we own property up on the side of a mountain, and we're the uppermost property where the stream, the source is right above our property. It goes through our property first. This particular stream is probably, if I had to guess, maybe 15 to 20 miles long, but it's a very small stream. And we are prohibited in our property, and I think rightly so, even though I was perturbed in the beginning, but I understand it now, is that we're prohibited from cutting trees around that creek, because the trees provide shade for the creek, which prevents evaporation. Now,
well, not only does it prevent evaporation, but it also prevents erosion. So if you
exactly
cut down the trees, right,
and diversion and such. So for that strip of property going through our land, we have very limited use of that creek, and we do not have the right to cut down that lumber to sell it, because it causes evaporation of that creek. Now, that would not directly affect the neighbor directly downstream from us, because the amount of evaporation would be so minute. But if everybody along that 15 miles or 20 miles did that, then the poor guy at the very end, the last guy, would end up with no water. So you have a case where these very minor violations cause a major violation to the end guy, the guy at the very end. So I'm not saying that I guess my point is, yeah, the reason it's redundant, though, that's my point, though, is that this is it's a very small issue that turns into a big issue, and a big fucking sticky issue, because you're talking about the agreement of 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 homesteads, and maybe the guy at the end of the river just doesn't have the resources to seek redress from the other 45 people upstream. So it becomes a sticky situation.
Yeah, definitely.
It could be possible that everyone who lived along the river signed a contract basically agreeing that there would be if you will, a communal ownership of the river. And thus they had stated, we as a community agreed, A, this is our river, but B, these are the rules concerning X river, what cannot be done, yada, yada, yada. So it's almost like similar to a residential community, or homeowners association, but instead in this case it'd be like a rivers association.
Yeah,
Owner.
That would be an optimal situation, but getting 40 cowboys out in the sticks to agree on anything is difficult.
Oh, speaking of owning,
but it's still theoretically possible, if not possible in reality. Maybe difficult, but still possible.
By the way, speaking of owning property, there, Cuddy, Kyron, turns out that my dad owns land in Arizona, kind of near Heber.
Heber.
Yeah, kind of where the Freedom Fest is going to be. The Jackalope Freedom Fest is over by Heber as well. So I'm going to check it out, and we just had a get together with the family and everything, and as far as like putting in dibs for different things that we're interested in, and I put in dibs on that. So I think it's 20 acres, 20 square acres, or 40. I'm not sure, 20 or 40 square acres, and so maybe might be able to actually make that Earth ship without having to buy the land that you're worrying about.
Yeah, the land is the big cost. Whether or not you can actually get some place to then be able to build your Earthship is the other part. So yeah, that would be great. And then Heber isn't all that far from Taos. I mean, considering that I'm about to drive across the damn country to get there.
Can I ask you a dumb question? What's in their
No
ship?
question.
An Earthship?
It's not a dumb question at all. Earthship is actually a house that is made out of tires, bottles, and cans. You take earth and you pound it into a tire and it makes a brick, and then you basically push the earth up against the home, berm it, you insulate it, you use bottles and cans in order to build non-structural walls and provide framework for concrete pours. And the house heats and cools itself using interactions with the environment, solar gain, thermal mass, treats its own sewage. Basically, you won't be a slave to your house. Your house will be a slave to you if you interact with it in a way that is conducive to your survival. It will grow your own food. It'll collect rainwater for you. It will wipe your ass, too. They're building that feature into the house.
Hey, Kyron, I have an Earthship question for you. Not to hijack your show, Robert, but
no, go for it. No, that's what the whole show's about. It's just a discussion about
everybody.
All right. So, all the Earthship information that I've seen online, which isn't exhaustive, I'll admit, it has been in desert regions, and I'm just curious if there's been some progress on design and implementation in northern regions. Like, say, for instance, Oregon, where in the winter we only get like 6 fucking hours of light, and I'm not even going to call it sun because it's cloudy most of the time.
Well, here's the beauty of it, is that Earthships tap into several sources of heat. If you've ever dug 2 feet down into the ground, you know that the temperature of the Earth is constant. In any basement you go to, there's a constant temperature of about 58 degrees year-round. In the wintertime, it's warm, and in the summertime it's cool. So they tap into the thermal mass, the thermal heat, the thermal temperatures of the Earth, which is 58. So that's your baseline starting temperature for your home any time of year. And so you're either heating or cooling it various degrees based on that temperature. Because you've basically built a cave. Your home is essentially a cave because of your use of Earth and how you've pushed the Earth up against it. You've tapped into that 58 degrees constant temperature. Yeah. So for a northern climate, even with the 6 hours of light, you are tapping into that 58 degrees. So the coolest your home will probably ever get is 58 degrees. Now, you can also add supplemental sources of heat, like, say, open up your oven or just cooking a meal would add a crazy amount of heat to your home. Your body heat will add a crazy amount of heat into your home because if you understand thermodynamics, heat goes to where there's no heat. The thermal mass of your home will absorb that heat and will emit it throughout your space, especially if you close up all the doors and everything. It will hold a lot of that heat in. Then you can always just, have a little wood stove that radiates heat into your space.
Yeah, I was curious as to, because one documentary I saw when he was learning how to build these Earthships, they were actually getting too hot, like they were too efficient, and he had to change some designs and that kind of thing.
So what happened was he had 2 stories of windows, and so because of that, he was getting too much solar gain, and the heat was just going into the house and just he said, imagine if he had cooked the baby or someone left the baby. What happened was a typewriter melted, an antique typewriter, because there was so much sun coming into this space. And he's like, imagine if it was a baby.
Right. I was curious, I guess more specifically to my question is, this guy is an engineer and pretty freaking bright, and he's experimented with the designs a lot, and I was just curious if he's put together any sort of formula specifically for northern regions or like certain parallels or elevations and that kind of thing to maybe help you in the construction so that you don't have to build 5 of them before you finally get one that's just right.
Right. Well, he's actually kind of done something smart. Granted that we wouldn't agree with it as anarchists, is that he's copyrighted what properties can be called earthships in order to be able to take responsibility for this thing not being sort of like shunned and used in such a way that powers that be try to make it look bad or disparage it or do anything to try to defame what an earthship is. And so you can't just call your house an earthship. He has to give you permission to do so, as far as what I understand the process is. Now, as far as the formula is concerned, I think he does have a formula. There's one in which he's saying that you could put multiple greenhouses on the front, and I'm sure that there are different stipulations for how to do that, depending on how high in altitude you go. But the extended greenhouses will provide sort of heat envelopes to prevent the escape of heat from the property, from the space. So there is somewhat of a formula. In the tropics, anything goes just about. You don't even need to really bury the houses or anything in tropical spaces, except for spaces where typhoons and hurricanes are an issue. But there is definitely a formula for northern climates, one in which you might add a second greenhouse to it to give you the heat retention that you would need.
What you're going to see in a lot of these cases is there's going to be heat collection that's done through the use of different colored materials, typically black, that's going to be behind some glass, and then it's going to have water passing through it potentially, and then you can adjust the temperature that's going to be maintained through the year by putting various different trees outside that change their foliage depending upon the weather. So when it becomes wintertime, the trees lose their leaves, and now you're getting more sunlight and you're getting more heat. And then during the summertime, they're all full of leaves, less sunlight, less heat.
Right. That's awesome. So I want to just point out in a future show of mine in the next few weeks, I'm traveling back to the homestead. My dad has basically created an earthship type of design for his chicken coop, and I'm going to take some pictures of it for you to show you how it works. Basically, he built a greenhouse, and then it's got a tunnel, so to speak, that goes into the chicken coop, and then it's got a door latch above, like at the top of the chicken coop, leading into the to the greenhouse. So it serves as a chicken run. They can go out there and they are protected from predators and that kind of thing, and they're able to kind of be free range within that greenhouse. And then at night, you can open up that top window, and it keeps the coop warm at night because all that hot air trapped in the greenhouse floods the chicken coop. And then every year he moves it to a separate location, and that greenhouse is then fertilized, and the soil is worked by the chickens and all that kind of thing. So anyway, I'll be documenting that for you and give you some heads up on it.
Cool. That sounds like a pretty damn cool chicken tractor system. Also, too, another alternative building technique for maybe housing, maybe greenhouses, maybe animal care, is something called a wallapini. It's basically a huge trench that's dug underground, and the opening for the trench is glass, and it's basically an underground greenhouse, which it kind of sounds like your pops has done something like that to an effect.
Yeah, that's kind of where you got the idea. I guess somewhere like some natives in like
in
India.
Bolivia. Bolivia, I think, is where the concept of walapinis came from. Peru, definitely.
Can you type that out in the chat? Because I will not remember that.
While you're doing that, I'll chime in, and if I can ask you another Earthship-related question, we're gonna go eco-anarchy now. what kind of sort of, oh boy, this is going to sound very vain, but what kind of sort of modern amenities can you get in these? Because I'm the Liberty geek. I'm
Whatever
not,
you want, whatever you want.
because I can't live without my internet. I mean,
No,
have
no,
you
no.
been on satellite internet? It's awful.
You know, it's so funny. I think when people think of sort of eco living, I think they automatically go to this Neolithic primitive existence, and none of us want to live that. I mean, once you've had the internet, it's like having sex for the first time, which many anarchists I don't feel have actually had sex with, as opposed to jacking off. I mean, it's like, you know, night and day. Although once you realize that women oftentimes are a huge headache, you might just want to stick with jacking off. Anyway, the,
That's not what jackalope means, man. That's not what jackalope.
Not what jackalope is. But I could understand how somebody could get that confused. But you know, think about this, right? Let's say you have a house that is so incredibly efficient that your starting temperature of your home is always 58 degrees. How much electricity are you not going to need to run blowers and fans to heat and cool that house? Because you're not really throwing the temperature off by much, just merely 12 degrees either way any time of year. So you're reducing the amount of electricity that you actually need, and actually create a context in which you can supply your own electricity, right? With solar photovoltaic panels on the front of your home.
So then all you need is the ISP to come out there and hook you up, and
if you want to do that, or you could get satellite and pay for it on demand, or however the hell else you want to do it. Like, you know, there's a myriad of ways. No one is going to come out and run cables to your shit, though.
Probably. Well, maybe if we had a more... this is a different topic altogether, but with the way that... I don't know how familiar you are with it now, but I believe on the subject of internet anarchy, there is a huge problem, especially in the United States, about government-controlled or subsidized, you know, ISPs. And I believe in a free market where there be a lot more companies. I bet if we had a free market today, that you could get someone to run their shit to your Earthship. I guarantee it, because the way it works right now is the companies, they don't have any competition right now. Absolutely none.
Right.
And I bet if there was competition, you would.
No, it's a complete cartel. I mean, and the fact that I even want to build an Earthship isn't indicative of the fact that I want to actually go out into the sticks or be away from people or want to be, you know, some hermit, some, you know, lone wolf. I actually love people a lot. I love having interactions. I fucking love being able to, at 3 o'clock in the morning, go get Chinese food in Chinatown. I just do not love, you know, paying exorbitant rent, exorbitant utility bills, and working half of my life just to watch it all go towards making someone else rich.
Are you, speaking of which, are you worried about the state trying to infringe on your Earthship at all?
I mean, of course. I mean, one of the ways that I even found out about Earthships was through the documentary Garbage Warrior, in which the state shut down the guy who developed the technique from even building further Earthships and developing and learning from them, and having to deal with that. I mean, building codes are changing. As a matter of fact, you know, they are shutting down people's ability to be able to, you know, fucking collect rainwater in some places. So,
isn't that scary?
Yeah, it certainly is. And so,
Yeah.
you know,
Chuck, I think one of the things that I've been reading Harry Brown lately. Have any of you read Harry Brown's stuff? Libertarian candidate in the early 70s, late 60s or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit.
He has a book called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And he actually gives a lot of great tips for avoiding what you're talking about. First of all, just fucking build the Earthship and don't worry about what the government's going to do. You just do it. Second thing is you don't need to publicize what you're doing. And the third thing is, Kyron, the reason he got hammered when he started building that Earthship is that he was building an Earthship community. And anytime you start to collectivize anything, you're going to get the attention of the government. So, yeah, we're all on this show largely because we want to get the word out, but at the same time, you can create a lot of personal freedom if you just stay under the damn radar.
It's true. I'm not building no Earthships nowhere on this planet. I'm going to stay in the city and drink this wonderful fluoride water.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and something else too, that like a way I could get around this, for instance, I live in a very urban environment, but nothing's right now says that I can't build a greenhouse in my backyard, and there's also nothing that states I couldn't put a hole in the side of my house and just attach that greenhouse, and nobody would have to know the wiser until I went to sell the house. Nobody's going to come and inspect that, so don't ask, don't tell.
Right, but you got snitching ass neighbors, status neighbors who, might say something. But
Snitching ass status neighbors took down my swimming pool when I was a kid. Those bastards.
Yeah, that's because you were back there having fun, screaming and shit.
Mm-hmm.
You owe them
I know.
life. You owe them your life. You didn't drown because of them.
Uh-huh, right.
If you were back there stealth swimming, getting your ninja swim on, they wouldn't know anything.
Oh.
But you had every kid in the neighborhood back there swimming, doing flips off of shit, screaming, driving your neighbors crazy. It's like, fuck this. We got to shut this pool down.
Oh, so I shared a link in the group chat. Sometime you guys might want to check it out. It's basically if you do a search.
I've seen this.
YouTube
this
for
is 100%. Yes, this is 100% true. You should totally watch it. Whoever's not seen this.
Internet cable saying "fuck you." Yeah, they're the thing
Robert,
that's funny about
it's only 2 minutes. Maybe you should just screen share it.
Well, no, it's copyrighted, I'm sure. So, anyway,
Oh, come on. They can't be that perfect.
Well, I mean, you can actually show copyrighted material if it's in a context in which you're critiquing it or have some kind of analysis of it. Like this is part of a larger work.
That's unfortunately not what Michael's policy is regarding the Voluntary Virtues Network.
Well, I mean, Michael's network is Michael's network, and who the fuck am I to say anything about how things are run here?
How about this? Why don't we go ahead and close the show down on the live stream, and then I'll share it, and then we can watch it. Because I do need to actually go, so I'll just go ahead and say goodnight to anybody who's sitting there watching us, and thank everyone for joining After Hours. And if you're watching this later on, well, that's just really cool. So if you got to this point, thanks. Anyway,
wouldn't it be like early hours for those people if they're watching in the morning?
Yeah.
If you got to this point, you're a fucking